En este video quiero presentar todos los partes de los exámenes de Escuela Oficial de Idiomas. I want to identify and to present each part of the exam from the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas. Yo he ido un profesor por 10 años y yo sé cómo importante estos exámenes están. And I have been a teacher for the last 10 years and I understand how important these exams are. Also with the Cambridge exams, they're very important for the oposiciones in Spain. So this video, the idea is just to introduce each part of the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas exams and to talk a little about each part and to give some advice and to give my opinion. Also to look at the marks and the scores that are available from the B1, the B2 and the C1. Okay, so the first screen I want to show you is the website, a typical website from Andalucía in relation to the exams. So this is the page and they have an option for different languages. So we select English and they give you a lot of practice exams to try. Okay, so you have exams here, B1 and B2 from June, September, June, and the C1 from June and probably September as well. So I recommend that you download a lot of material from the available websites and collect tests to practice and to work. Okay, so here in my document, I have the B1 on the left, I have the B2 in the middle, and I have the C1 on the right. Okay, so there's 3 different pages, B1, B2, and B3. Okay, this is the guida de corrección, ¿vale? Y antes esto, quiero mostrar my folder. I want to show you my folder. So when you download the documents, you have 3 different folders, B1, B2, and C1. So if you enter B1 and June, for example, they give you all the options. Okay, so they give you the sample for the reading, the comprehension de lectura, the oral, the expression of writing and expression of oral as well. Okay, so just to show you very quickly, for example, this is the B1 and I'm going to open another document here, I think, with the computer. Okay, so this, yeah, perfect. This is the B1, a typical example, the comprehension de lectura. You have your introductions and very important to understand and to read in detail, of course. So first we have the first tarea, the first task. So it's a reading comprehension. You have a full page of a text and quite difficult vocabulary, not easy. It's a fluent article, fluent text, so a little difficult. And at the bottom, you have the questions. So these questions, this style is very typical in the B1, typical in the B2, and very typical in the C1. So the style and the structure is very similar in every level. Okay, so that's important to remember. So you can see you have A, B, C options, and really it's very tricky because there's possibilities for A, possibilities for B, possibilities for C, and they're very similar. So it's necessary to pay a lot of attention to the options and pay a lot of attention to the reading, okay? And to the question in particular. It's necessary to understand fundamentally the question first, okay? So that is an example of the B1 reading. You've 7, 8, 10 questions. And the second task is slightly different. So you have to read the bottom and match with in the correct position of a next text. So comprehension, similar style in B1, B2, C1 for Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, and similar concept in the Cambridge exams for the comprehension. It's necessary to read the text and necessary to identify the correct option from your answer. So reading is very difficult and very similar in all the exams, okay? So that's just an example of the B1, the comprehension de lectura. So if we go back to the folder and we will check the next one, it is the comprehension oral for the B1, just for example. And again, very similar in the B2 and the C1. So the first page is the instructions, and it's necessary to read and understand perfectly. And then we continue. So you hear 5 extracts from a radio program, and it's necessary to match the headings. So you have headings A to K, and it's necessary to match the headings to the with extracts 1 to 5. Okay, so from the listening you have extracts 1 to 5, and it's necessary to match the correct heading with the correct extract from the audio as well. Okay, and there can be 1 or more headings per extract. So it's possible to enter, for example, B, you can put 2 and 5. For F, you can put 3 and 1. So it's possible more than 1. Okay, so that's an example of the listening. And again, in the Cambridge exams, there's very similar exercises for the listening. So it's the same technique, it's the same skill, and the same talent. Okay. And then the next one, we have questions, multiple choice. So you have a question and you have A, B, and C. But again, they're very tricky because in the audio, it's possible you think A, it's possible you think B, it's possible you think C. So it's difficult. And the detail, you have to pay a lot of attention to the detail and try and catch the correct word. Okay. I'm sure you have a lot of experience with practicing listening. Okay. So that's an example of the listening, the comprehension oral for B1. So we continue, we go back to the next one. And we have expression y interacción escrita. So you need to read the instructions. And here we have a notice or a message to a friend. And your job is to write a letter, write your answer to, I think it's a website, okay? So you need to read specifically the question, and it's a type of writing in the first part. It could be formal, it could be informal, and you need specifically to answer the question fully. Maybe there's 2 or 3 parts to the question, and it's necessary that you write in the appropriate way. That's part 1 of the B1 writing. And then part 2 is an entry, a blog. Okay, so a blog entry. It could be formal, it could be informal, depending on the question. So the style of your writing is very important, and the variety of your writing in the grammar, like a mix of vocabulary, a mix of tenses, and that's the same concept in every English exam. Okay, so that's just an example. Again, on the level B1, B2, and C1, the style of the question and the structure of the questions are very similar in the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas. So we close this document and we go to the final page, just for example. And again, it's the expression y interacción oral. And this is very interesting. So the first one is usually a monologue. The first one is a monologue and the second is a dialogue. So you have pictures here and you're going to talk about your best friend in this example. So you have to describe and explain, and you have to talk about a particular question. So it's necessary that you understand clearly the question in the exam and you answer specifically the question. And again, the variety of your vocabulary, the variety of your grammar is very important as well. Okay, so that's just a typical speaking exam. And again, in the Cambridge exams, the FCE, the CAE, the first certificate, the advanced, and the proficiency, it's a similar style of exam. Okay, so that's task 1. And then task 2 is the dialogue. So you have to try and convince, in this case, your husband or your wife that it's a good idea to accept your job. So the detail of the question is very important. And again, you need to understand clearly the question and answer correctly and specifically every part of the question. And again, your variety of vocabulary and your variety of grammar as well and structures is very important. So that is an example of the speaking. Okay, so we close that. That's the B1. The B2 and the C1 are very, very similar structures. And this page is specifically the guida de corrección. Okay, so here you can see on the left, again, this is the B1, the guide for correction. And in the middle, we have the guide for correction for B2. And on the right, we have a guide of correction for C1. So the structure you can see is identical. Comprehension de lectura, 2 tasks in the C1, Comprehension oral, 2 tasks in the C1. Expresión e interacción escrita, 2 tasks, task 1 and task 2, and the same for the interaction oral, so 2 tasks. And in the middle, we have the B2, and it's exactly the same. Okay, so the test structure is the same, and there's the B1, exactly the same. The puntuación de cada tarea is the same for B1 and B2, exactly the same, except the comprehension oral. So this is the B1, and for task 1, you have 10 points, and for task 2, you have 8 points, okay? And that's for the listening exercise. And in the B2, it changes. In the listening in the B2, the first one you have 8 points, and the second one you have 10 points, okay? In the C1, it changes a little again. So for the listening, you have 8 points for task 1 and 8 points for task 2. But so the total, and there's an extra change for the C1 for the comprehension lectura. The first part in the reading comprehension, you have 8 points. And in the first part in the B2, you have 10 points. So the scores are a little different. And finally, in total, for each exercise in the C1, you have 18 points for the lectura, and you need 9 points to pass. And the same with the second comprehension oral, you have 16 points in total from the listening, and you need 8 to para apto. Okay, and then if we move to the B2, similar, 20 points in the comprehension lectura, and you need 10 to pass, and 18 for the comprehension oral for the listening, and you need 9 to pass. And for the B1, it's the same, 20 points for the first part, 18 for the second, and you need 10 and 9. In the expression e interaction escrita for the writing, you have task 1, you have 100 points multiplied by 2 members of the correcting team. So you have 200 points for the first writing and 200 points for the second writing. So in total, 400 points. And that is the same in the B2 and the C1, exactly the same. And you need points of 200 to pass. And finally, for the expression e interaction oral, for the speaking, the same, exactly the same for each exam. You need 400 points. You have 400 points, and you need 200 to pass. And each task is 200 points. Okay. So that's the basic structure of the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas exams, and very interesting and very important. And with my videos, I hope to practice each part little by little, to do exercises every week and to try and explain the tips. So today, I want to show you an activity from the B2. This is an exam for the B2, and let me find the folder so I can show you specifically the exam. So B2 September, and it's in comprehension de lectura, and the topic, I think, is China, if this is correct. Yes, so this is the correct page, and here you can see the title. Want to catch a movie in China, you'll have to sit through propaganda films first. Okay, so it's 1 page of a text, and to be honest, the vocabulary is tricky, a little tricky. So now I will explain the difficult vocabulary, and also at the bottom we have the questions. So we have 10 questions, and let me find the questions. I think they're down lower. 10 questions for the first part. Here are the questions. So I will also explain the vocabulary from the questions as well. 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. And honestly, the trick here is to really understand the detail of the question and to catch the answer in the text specifically, because unfortunately, each option is very similar, and there's a lot of possible traps and a lot of possible problems from identifying the correct answer. So it's very, very difficult. For native speakers, it's the same. It's a little difficult. So today I just want to show you the vocabulary that maybe is a clue or a secret for the questions and the answers. And hopefully you can try yourself first if you want to try, and then later you can watch the video and check the explanation. Okay. So in my page here, I have the first page, all the pages with the vocabulary and the questions. So I want to explain a little the first page. And here, the first one is a cinema goer. So that's difficult already. And I'll put my notes here so you can see. So a cinema goer, I'm going to write here, this is the content. So el verbo is to go to the cinema, and it's possible, creative, to have the substantivo a cinema goer. Okay, so I'm going to do that first, to go to the cinema, and then it's possible a cinema goer is a person who visits the cinema, a person who attends the cinema, or a person who goes to watch a movie. Okay, so that's a cinema goer. A little difficult. Preposition in is in relation to the country. So we say in Spain, in Argentina, in Ireland, in Italy. So for country, we say in. Will be greeted. So the verb is to greet, like to welcome. To greet a person is to welcome a person. And in this case, it's with the verb to be. So it's the passive. When you have the auxiliary verb to be and the participle, it's an example of the passive. So they will be greeted by many faces of its booming film industry. So that is a good expression as well, because the verb is to boom, and it's similar to grow quickly, like dramatically, to grow really, really quickly. And the adjective is booming, typical for the economy and typical for property, a bubble, for example. The sector of industry is booming and growing. And here it's booming industry, okay? And at is the preposition for location. You are at the cinema, you are at the event, you are at the meeting, and in this case, you're at the screening. And the screening is another name for the movie, okay? Because the screen is the plantilla, and in the movie, you have the plantilla, the big screen, and the substantivo is possible, the screening, like the mostrar, to show. So the verb is to screen the movie, como jugar, and the screening is like the showing, or the substantivo, okay, the showing of the movie. So a little bit tricky for sure, and the vocabulary in this text is very fluent and probably advanced vocabulary, but the difference between the B2 and the C1 is probably in the questions. Okay, so maybe more difficult questions in the C1 compared to the B2. And the latest is most important, the latest information, the latest technology. It's not the last. So there's a difference between last and latest. Last is último, and latest is como más recién, the most recent. And it's very important because it's common in English. We say recent news, latest news, latest information, okay, and last, último is different. So you need to be clear the difference between last and latest, okay? So here's the latest directives and policy visions, a series of. So in Español is una serie, but always in English it's plural, even with a singular. So we say a series, always. So that's irregular and it's important. So always we say one series or a series, never a series. And that is the common error and the common mistake. It's very simple, but it's very obvious when people make the mistake. And here it's a series of 4 movies called The Glory and Dream, Our Chinese Dream, Build As. So this is advanced and it's very colorful and it's a bit difficult, okay? So build is in relation to the movies, it's on the bill, like the list of names, that's the bill. And basically here, it is billed as, it is commented as or named as, maybe listed as. Okay, so that's basically the translation, and it's a big secret for one of the answers, but it is difficult. So here it's billed as or advertised, probably advertised as. That's the best translation or the best synonym, advertised as. Okay, And then the next one, announcements by authorities have been playing in. So the preposition for the theatre, we say in the theatre. It's possible at the theatre for a specific location, but in is like dentro, inside. So in the theatre since July 1st. So remember the difference between since and from. Since is one particular moment in the past, since 8 o'clock, since February, since 2001, and from is usually two moments in the past, from February until June, from 9 o'clock until 10 o'clock. So that's the big difference between since and from. In this case, it's one moment in the past. According to, that's the preposition, and it's según in Espanol, according to. Here we have plantilla, but it's the verb. Okay, so a screen is a plantilla, but it's also a verb, to screen. And it's exactly the same as to screen, to screen the movie. We had it already. So here's the verb. So we had the substantivo before the screening, and now we have the verb to screen a movie. So very interesting. Of course, you can say show, play, but this is more advanced vocabulary, and that's the reason it's a bit more difficult. A blockbuster is very important vocabulary as well. And basically, it's a big movie, a big, successful movie. A mega movie is a blockbuster, a big success. A massive movie is a blockbuster. And alike is the adjective, which means the same. So they play the movies before local films and Hollywood blockbusters. So they're very different, but they play the same movie before each one. And that's the significance of alike in this case. And that's another clue for the answer in the questions. Okay, so the propaganda clip. A clip is like a trailer, very important. Clip is the verb to cut. And in the hairdressers, the peluqueria, you go for a clip and it's like a little cut. So to clip the hair is to cut your hair. And a clip in the movie is a trailer. So important for sure. And here we have the propaganda clips, plural, aimed at. That's the typical preposition. Aim is como enfocar, and aim at is the typical combination. Aimed at young people, aimed at old people. So very important to remember the combination with the preposition. This last paragraph, each of the four clips promotes one key clave slogan and of Jinping's administration. So this is the possession. And basically the rule with the possession at B2, I think you're okay and you should be fine. Brian's pen, okay? And it has the apostrophe and the S for singular. But remember the rule for the plural is here. And we say my friend's pen, singular, but my friend's plural pens. Okay, so in that case, we have the apostrophe and no S extra because it's plural. So that's the exception and the rule. This word is very interesting and it's a key for the answer for sure. So here is the adverb, catchily named. The verb is to catch, como coger, to catch the ball, catch the influenza, catch, okay? And the adjective is very famous and very good adjective, like trendy. If something is very catchy, it's very trendy. There's a phrasal verb to catch on. It's like to have success. And in this case, it's similar to the adjective catchy, like addictive and very popular. And in this case, it's the adverb. So the name is very popular. The name is very entertaining. The name is very enjoyable and interactive. And that's a big clue for the answer. The next page, okay, so I'll just try to explain the key vocabulary because it's quite heavy. Seems is parather. Beijing seems determined to exercise greater control, but ever really means more. So they had a lot of control before and they want to exercise more control. And that's a key for one of the answers as well. That little word ever is the key because they had control before and they want to increase a little bit more. Lecturer. So the lecture is the substantive and the lecturer is the person. And usually the ER is the suffix for a person. Sometimes it's irregular OR, like doctor, director, but often, frequently, it's ER. And in this case, it's the lecturer, it's regular. In is for the university. It's possible in university, and at the bottom, it's possible at the university. So it's flexible. You can be dentro and you can be at. So the preposition is important. Grows is crecer, and then the preposition grows out of, como desarrollar, to develop. It grows out of the very simplistic and antiquarian, so very similar to Spanish, very old nature of Beijing's propaganda and medium system, in contrast to a very good combination and very typical for grammar, and especially the Cambridge exams. You have the combination. It's necessary. In contrast to. Similar in Spanish, I think. Up to is a maximum. So it's possible up to 32. So its maximum is 32, but it's possible 28. It's possible 29. Up to is a maximum. Okay. Chinese, the difference between adjective and substantivo, the nationality of the person is Chinese and the country is China. Same as Brazil, Brazilian, Ireland, Irish. So you need to be clear always with the difference between the nationality and the country. Okay. As well as is very important. Late of, that word in this sentence is a bit tricky, and it means recently. He was performing recently of that movie, Rogue One. Recruited, that's the passive, an example of the passive. Digestible, it's a good adjective. Took part in is the same in Spanish, to take part in, to participate. According to, según. Fare, this is very tricky. So only when the country and the nation fare well. There's two examples. Normally in English, we say farewell, like goodbye, adios, farewell. It's the same concept, because if you're faring well, it's como haciendo. You're doing good. So here, when the nation do, it's like hacer, to fare. It's maybe old English. To fare is like to do. So it's possible, how are you faring? How are you doing? And it's really probably old English as well. And that's the same when we say adios, goodbye, farewell. It's like to be good and to be well on your making your trip or making your travel. Okay. And grinning is very important vocabulary as well. To grin is when you, it's like smile, but maybe con muchas caras. So you're smiling, but it's con muchas caras, grinning. Okay. So the verb is to grin, and the substantivo is a grin, and the gerundio is grinning. Okay, very, very good. A backdrop is connected with against. It's the typical connection, against a backdrop. Drop is caer, so it's like a background. Backdrop and background are very, very similar. And basically the action is here, the principal action is here, and the backdrop is behind. So the surrounding thing behind you, okay? Come together is venir juntos, to come together, good expression with the preposition. Give power to, that's the preposition, dar poder a, give power to. As long as is very important expression. And to be sure, let me try and get the translation here, so I'm totally sure as well. Sorry, as long as, it's like depende. I don't know if it's possible here with the translation. As long as, okay, so yes, English to Spanish. And it is a very key expression, and I'll just click here, consent, siempre y cuando, as long as, more con tal de que. Very important in English. So here, so long as. Meanwhile is like mientras, very similar to mientras. Among is the same, like with, among or amongst are the same as with. Among or amongst it's old English. There's no difference really between among and amongst, maybe more formal amongst. And here, the couplet is not very typical. It's related to couple, obviously, but I think it's a more formal way to write it. Was written by, that's an example of the passive, the past simple of the auxiliary to be plus the participle. Some degree of is algo grado de. It's very fluent. It's a good linker, and it's for cohesion. So algo grado de, some degree of. Salvo, I think it's the same in Spanish. A long time adjective, so a long time observer. And here it's the adjective. So it's possible in two situations, a long time but here it's just it's one adjective. So the first one, long, is the adjective and time is the substantivo, but the second example, that's just one adjective, a long time observer, and observer is the substantive. So just little details, not too important for the question. And at is the location as well for the university. So it's possible in the university and it's possible at the university. And the last page, this one is classic and very difficult to understand, but very important phrasal verb in English. Fed up is like cansado. Okay, the verb is to feed. And if you feed your face with food, but not necessarily food, for example, work. You have a lot of work, you take a lot of work, and finally you are fed. Fed is the participle up. So it's not possible to take more. You reach alcanzar, to limit, limite. You've reached the limit. Okay, you are fed up. Very important phrasal verb and very common in conversation and movies and family and every situation. Okay, in your face is a good adjective, so it's excessive, it's impossible to escape, impossible to avoid. It's in your face, and in this case it's the adjective. So very good creative English. Whether is if, so whether is the same as if. Whether and if, very different from tiempo. The pronunciation is similar, but the weather, like the rain, the snow, is different to weather. I know it sounds very similar, but in English there's two very different words, so I'll put that here. Different to the weather. Okay, so very important to recognize the detail. And at B2, I think you're okay. Pay attention to is como prestar atención. So that's the typical preposition, pay attention to. Good. Now the questions. So if you want to watch a movie in China, you have to skip ads. Skip is saltar, to jump. And ads are advertisements. Okay. At is the preposition for the session. At the end. So for the start and at the end, we say at. At the start of the day, at the end of the day. At for start and at for end. So the first question is, these series, plural, of short films are advertised, promoted by booming, and greeted. So the questions are difficult. And I recommend that you try them yourself. I'll give you the explanation now. So the series, we go back to the promoted by booming Hollywood, advertised by authorities, greeted by the communist parties. I think it's the answer A, advertised. And the reason it's advertised is because billed as. Okay, I'm going to show you the answer. They say billed as in here, the second paragraph, billed as public by authorities. So that's the key sentence. And it's very difficult because billed is a synonym for advertise. And that's a good example of the difficulty of the exams, okay, for the questions. So it's very, very hard. And the second question, the video started at the beginning of June on Wednesday at the beginning of all movies. So the answer is C, okay, because I'll show you. So the movie started, here you can see July, since July 1st, but that's not June. So June is in the question and it's not possible. So that's incorrect. They screen, and this is the key again. So screen is a synonym for to play or to show the movie. And that's tricky. So the reason they screen before local movies and Hollywood blockbusters alike. So they start before the movies. Okay. And that's the answer for number 2. So the answer for 2 is at the beginning of all movies. The intention of the government was to educate people in the teachings. So the verb is to teach, and the teachings is the substantivo. So a little strange word, not very typical, but very important as well. The teachings of the party. Entertain while informing. So the answer was A, to educate the people in the teachings. And the reason was aimed at helping the better understanding and accept the policies of the party. And party is partido political, the political party. Okay, so the answer for number 4 was, as we saw, sorry, number 3, A. to entertain, educate the people. Number 4, the fourth movie's name has been titled in a dull way, tricky way, engaging. So tricky is truco. Dull is very dark and very boring. Dull is aburrido, very dull, and it's typical for the weather. The weather is very dull, very dark. Engaging is like interaction. And the fourth video, so let's go back to the name of the fourth video. And it is, I think before. So here's the first one, Chinese Dream on the bottom, the core values of socialism, 4 comprehensives, and the catchily named 5-in-1 overall. So the secret here is catchily. Okay, so it's very interactive, it's very engaging and entertaining. And for that reason, the answer is C. Beijing's propaganda was already complex and contemporary, already exerted some control. So the answer was B, because we saw ever. They had control and ever more. So they had control in the past and they wanted to increase. That word ever was the key. Remember in the text? And then number 6, the group of 32 people are all top professionals, are on a special list. On is the preposition for a list, includes major authorities. It was A. They are all top celebrities, professionals. And the reason it is A is because of this word here, A-listers. When you say an A-lister, it's a top celebrity, a top professional. It's the best, an A-lister. And that's the reason it's the answer. So an A-lister, like Jackie Chan. Okay. And the next one, the celebrity actors have been paid by the government, donated their performances, or given a strong touch to the message. And in the text, they say pro bono. So it was free. They worked for free. It was almost charity. And I think the answer was to give a strong touch, like an influence. They give a strong touch, tocar in Espanol. So probably an influence, a strong persuasion or an influence. And the answer, I think, was C in that case. A, smiley. So that's S-M-I. That's bad spelling, I think. So I'm going to write smiley. That's a mistake. The verb is to smile, and smiley is the adjective. So, according to Segun, if the country does well, and this is related to fare. Remember, are they faring? How are you faring? Fare well, faring good. How are you doing? So here, if the country does a good job in entertaining, people will do well in their professions. If the country has a good fortune, people have good fortune. I think it was probably B, I think. So if the country does a good job in entertaining, people will do well. No, I think it was A. So let me just double check with Jackie what he said. I think he's at the bottom here. Yes, he's in this this one paragraph. So only when the country and the nation fare well, everybody will fare well, he said, grinning. And when it fights for the beautiful dream, they can come together into tremendous power. So I think for that reason, it was B. Yeah, B. So the correct answer was B. If they have good fortune in the country, the people will have good fortune as well. And number 9, Willie Lamb welcomes the latest propaganda, thinks the campaign can have a negative impact, is a bit skeptical about the propaganda. The answer was A. So he welcomes the latest propaganda. And the reason it is A is because here at the bottom, there is some degree of sophistication to this latest propaganda salvo. So it's positive, and he said it's sophisticated, so it's very good. And the fact that the Chinese dream are spoken by well-known movie celebrities might attract the attention of the part of the audience. So it's positive. He thinks it's very good. And for that reason, the answer is A. Okay. And the final one, the movie has been greeted with mixed feelings, a positive reception, and or a cold welcome. So greeted is like welcomed. And let's check the reaction of the people at the end. Here, especially young people are fed up, so they're tired of in-your-face propaganda. It is doubtful. So that's the key. It's not sure. It's uncertain if cinema goers will actually pay attention to the slogan. So probably skeptical, I think, for that reason. Maybe mixed feelings, yeah, because he's skeptical. Okay. And that's it. So that's an example of the reading you can see from the B, I think it's the B2. And you can see the questions are tricky because the options are very similar and you need to pay a lot of attention and a lot of detail in the answer. But be confident and be fast with the velocity, because you need to be careful with the time in the exam. Okay, so a little practice, and I recommend to read. The best way to improve the grammar and to be familiar with the structures and the vocabulary is to read. Read as much as you can. Okay, so that's an example of the scores for the marks and the scores for the exam. And remember, the B1, the B2 and the C1 are very similar. The structures are almost identical in the exams for the Escuela Oficial de Idiomas, and the scores and the marks are very, very similar, practically the same, with a few small differences. And today we did the example from the reading. Okay, thank you very much. This is all free, as I said, and if you want to make, this is free, but if you want to make it, give a tip or a small donation, that would be great. And there's my details on the PayPal if you want. It's not necessary, but if you want, fantastic. Okay. Thank you very much. I hope that you enjoy the rest of your day and keep in touch with the videos, and hopefully we'll talk soon. Okay, thank you very much and bye-bye.